Spring Security 6.4.2 introduces a powerful new feature, one-time token authentication. In this video, I will walk you through how to implement this authentication method in a Spring Boot application from scratch. We will start by setting up Spring Security to handle authentication using one-time token. For simplicity, we will use InMemoryUserDetailsManager for authentication. When a user attempts to log in, the system will generate a one-time token and send it via email. The user can click on the magic link containing the token to gain access to the application. This approach enhances security and simplifies the login process. It's going to be an exciting hands-on session. So, let's dive in. Alright, let's start from scratch and create a brand new Spring Boot application. To do that, I will use my favorite tool, Spring Initializer. So let's head over to the start.spring.io. Now let's configure our project setup. First, I will select the build tool as Maven since that's what I prefer. Next, for the programming language, I am choosing Java. For the Spring Boot version, always try to use the latest stable release. At the time of this recording, the latest version is Spring Boot 3.4.2. Also, make sure that the selected version supports Spring Security 6.4.2 because the one-time token feature has introduced in this version. Now, let's update the metadata. For the group name, I will enter my domain name com.learnwithiftekhar. For the artifact name, I will use Spring OTT. Let's also give it a short description, Spring Security one-time token. For packaging, I'll keep it as jar since that's what we typically use for Spring Boot applications. And for Java version, the minimum required version is Java 17, but I'll be using Java 21. You can pick any version 17 or higher. Next, we need to add the required dependencies. I'll click the Add Dependencies button. If you are using a Mac, you can also press Command plus B, and on Windows, it's Control plus B. Now let's select the necessary dependencies. First, I will add Spring Web since we are building a web application. Then Thymeleaf because our app will have some HTML pages. Next, we need Spring Security, which will handle authentication. And finally, Java Mail Center, since we will be sending magic link via email. That's all the dependencies we need for now. Now let's generate a project. I will click the Generate button. The project is now generated and downloaded. Now, extract the zip file and open it in your favorite IDE. I have imported the project into my IDE. I am using IntelliJ IDEA, which is my go-to IDE for Java Spring Boot projects. If you are new to Spring Boot development, I highly recommend using IntelliJ IDEA as well. Here, I am using the Ultimate Edition, but you can use the Community Edition, which is completely free. And honestly, it's more than enough for most developers. I personally prefer the Ultimate Edition because it comes with a lot of great features that make working with Spring Boot, database, and other frameworks much easier. If you would like to try it out, I have provided a link in the description where you can get 3-month subscription of IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate Edition for 100% free. That's say, feel free to use any IDE you are comfortable with, whether it's Spring Tool Suite, Visual Studio Code, NetBeans, or Eclipse. The IDE is just a tool. What really matters is that you know how to compile, build, and run your code effectively. Alright, now let's start the project. First, let's expand the src folder, then main, then Java. Let's also expand the sidebar a bit to get a clear view. Inside this package, we'll adding all our Java source code. Now, let's run the project. And there we go. The project has started successfully. If you look the console output, you'll notice that Spring Security has automatically generated a default password. Now, let's test it. If we try to access the application in the browser, we'll see this default login page. That means Spring Security is already working out of the box. But we don't want to use that default behavior. So next we'll configure Spring Security to work the way we need it to. To customize Spring Security, we need to create a new configuration class. Let's go to the root package and create a new Java class. I'll name this class SecurityConfig. Now, to make this class a managed bean, we need to annotate it with configuration. We also need to enable Spring Security, so we add enable web security. Now, let's configure our Spring Security settings to allow authentication using one-time token. Now, inside this class, we need to define a bean for security configuration. I will create a method that returns security filter chain. This method takes a HTTP security as a parameter which we will use to configure our security settings. Now let's define our authorization rule. We want to ensure that all requests require authentication. To do this, we need http dot authorize http request. Here an arrow function. Any request needs to be authenticated. Next, let's enable form-based login using Spring Security's default setting. We'll go with defaults, so customizer dot with defaults. Now, let's enable one-time token authentication feature. Go with customizer with defaults. This will allow users to log in using a token instead of a password. Actually, we will generate a magic link that consists token and send it via email so that the user can sign in by just clicking the link. And this one-time token login enables one-time token authentication, allowing users to authenticate using a unique single-use login token. And finally, we need to build and return our security configuration to apply those settings. And that's it. With this setup, all request requires authentication. Users can log in via the default form login and one-time token authentication is enabled. Now that our security configuration is in place, we need to create user for our application. For simplicity, I'm going to use in-memory authentication, which means we will define a user directly in our application instead of using a database. To do this, let's add a new bean inside our security config class. Define a bean of type InMemoryUserDetailsManager. Name is InMemoryUserDetailsManager. This will manage our in-memory users. Inside the method, we need to define our user. Spring Security uses a user details object to represent user. Let's create a user. User equals user. Make sure you import the user from Spring Framework, Security, Core, User Details with username, providing my email address as my username. Next, let's define password. For simplicity, I am using plain text password by adding an OOP before the password. In real-world application, you must use a password encoder to hash password before storing them. For example, you should use bcrypt password encoder instead of NOP for security reason. Now, we'll call build to finalize the user details object. Finally, we create a new instance of in-memory user details manager, passing our user object as constructor parameter. This tells Spring Security to use this in-memory user for authentication. That's it. Our in-memory user is now set up. Let's start the project and see if anything works. Here in the console, there is an exception. Let's see what is that. Here is the message. A one-time token generation success handler is required to enable one-time token. Okay, so this means we need to create a success handler for our one-time token authentication. Let's fix this by implementing the missing handler. First, let's create a new Java class inside the main package. I will name it Magic Link Generation Success Handler. This class needs to implement an interface called One-Time Token Generation Success Handler, which is responsible for handling the response when a one-time token is successfully generated. Since we are implementing an interface, we need to override its required method. But before that, let's define a private final field inside this class. Here, we are defining a field of type One-Time Token Generation Success Handler. This will handle the redirection after the one-time token is successfully generated. Now, we need to initialize the redirect handler. In the real-world project, you should use constructor to initialize this. But here, I am making it simple. I am initializing it here. Create a new instance of redirect one-time token generation success handler and provide the redirect URL as /ott/send. So, whenever a one-time token is successfully generated and sent, Spring Security will automatically redirect the user to this URL. Now, generate. Here in the screen, you can see my shortcut for this menu. I have modified this shortcut to meet my preference. Your shortcut may be different. Choose override methods. Here, I am going to override this handle method from our one-time token generation success handler interface. Let's move the parameter to the new line so that you can check it clearly. Now, In this method, we need to implement the logic for handling the one-time token after it is successfully generated. I'm going to refer to the official Spring Security documentation for guidance. Here is the Spring Security's one-time token login documentation. Scrolling down, here is a sample code they have provided. I am going to use that. Back to the IDE. Here, inside the handle method, we need to declare new variable named builder of type URI component builder. This variable will be used to construct a magic link URL that includes the one-time token. Next, we need to provide the base URL for our builder. To do that, we use URI components builder from HTTP URL. This method takes an absolute URL as input and prepares it for modification. Inside this method, we need to pass the full request URL, which we can extract from the request object. This retrieves the complete URL of the user's incoming request. Then, we use replace path to reset the path of the URL to the application's base context. This ensures that we start with a clean base URL, keeping only the application's root. Now, we need to clear any existing query parameters and fragments from the URL to avoid conflicts. To remove query parameters, let's add replace query to null. This removes any existing query parameters from the request URL. Next, we also need to remove any fragments from the URL. Now, we need to set the correct path where the user will be redirected to complete the login process. That is login/OTT. This sets the path to login/OTT, which is the endpoint where the user will authenticate using their one-time token. Finally, we need to attach the one-time token as a query parameter so our user can log in securely. To do this, we use query params and provide the token name and token value. Here, the token is the query parameter name that our application will read when processing the request, and this getTokenValue method retrieves the actual token value that the user will use to authenticate. With that, our magic link is fully constructed and ready to be sent via email. Now that we have the complete magic link URL, we need to convert it into a string so that it can be used in our application and store the result in a variable called magic link. Before we send the magic link via email, let's print it to the console so we can inspect it and make sure everything is working correctly. Now we'll send mail to the user. Let's do it later. Here I am providing a to-do comment so that I can refer it back. Now that we have generated the magic link URL, we need to handle the one-time token events and process it the authentication flow. To do this, we call the handle method on our redirect handler, passing the request, response, and generated one-time token. Now, we need to configure some endpoints. This includes setting up our redirect URL, which will handle the redirection after a successful one-time token generation. Let's go step by step. First, in the main package, create a new Java class and name it page controller. Annotate it with controller to designate it as a Spring MVC controller. Inside this controller, we will declare an endpoint to handle the root URL. Since this will handle GET request, we will use GET mapping annotation. Because this is the root URL, we don't need to explicitly specify parameter inside GET mapping. If an endpoint is at the top level, we can simply write GET mapping without providing a path. Create a public method named index that returns a string. The method accepts two parameters, principal and model. Inside the method, add a model attribute named user, setting its value to principal.getName. Finally, return index, which refers to the HTML file responsible for generating the view. Next, we need to define an endpoint for the redirect URL after a successful one-time token generation. We'll use getMapping/OTT send to define this endpoint. Create a public method named OTT send that returns string. This method simply returns OTT send pointing to an HTML page that we will create shortly. Next, let's create the required HTML files. Inside the resources template directory, create two new HTML files. First one is index. Create another HTML file named OTT send. Collapsing the sidebar to make some room. This is the OTT send HTML page which will be rendered after sending OTT successfully. It will contain a success message. Let's close all other tabs. Here, as we are using the TimeLeaf templating engine, we need to include the TimeLeaf namespace in the HTML tag of this page. Let's change the title OTT sent. In the body, adding a div. Inside the div, add an h1 tag with the text OTT sent. Below that, add a p tag with the message our one-time token has been sent. Please check your email. Let's add some styles. Again, I am going with the bare minimum. So here I am adding inline styles. In the div, make the text align to the center. Then for the h1, make the font size to 50 pixel and add a top margin of 50 pixel. For the paragraph tag, give it a font size of 30 pixel. Now we will edit our index page. Copy the entire content of the OTT sent HTML file. Now open the index.html file. Replace the code with the copied HTML. Here we'll make some modification to the text. First, update the h1 to hello. Change the text color to green in the paragraph. Removing the existing text, I am going to replace it with dynamic value using TimeLeaf. Here we'll view the name of the logged in user. This user corresponds to the model attribute that we set in our index method inside page controller. Let's open our page controller. Here we have provided this user attribute. The value is logged in user's name. Now it's time to check if everything is working. Start the project. Here is an exception. Let's check. It's still showing we need to define one-time token generation success handler. But we have defined one. Why is the error is happening? Okay. Here we need to annotate it with component. Now let's start the project. This time it started successfully. Let's try it out. Opening the browser. Let's close this tab. This was our login page of the application. Refresh it. Here you can see we have an additional input field for the token. Here in the username field, we will provide our username. Let's try to log in the application with username and email first. Giving my username, then my password and sign in. Here we have successfully signed in and it is showing the message hello with my email address, which is my username of this application. Now we need to try to use the one-time token. Logging out this application. Here in the username field, for the request a one-time token form, I am giving my username. Send token. Now let's check our console. Here is the magic link, but it's displaying object reference, not the actual link. Let's check the issue. Here in this handle method, here is our magic link string. We are using two string. It needs to be two URI string. Now let's restart again. In the application, provide my username, send token. Check the console. Nothing is printed. Back to the application. Provide the username again. Send token. Actually, refresh the page. Providing my username, send token. Check the console. Here we have the magic link generated. It prints 2 times as we have submitted the form multiple times. Now I need to configure one more security attribute. Stopping the application. Navigate to the security config class. Here in this authorized HTTP request, we have added the rule that every request needs to be authenticated. But here we need to whitelist our OTT sent success URL so that it is permitted without authentication. We can do this using request matchers. Here provide the URL. This is this URL. Let's copy it. Paste the URL here and whitelist this URL using permit all. And also I will whitelist another endpoint. Navigating to our magic link generation success handler class. Here we have this endpoint login/OTT. We will whitelist this. Copy this one. Now let's proceed with adding this to our security configuration and permit all. Now start the project. Open the browser. Refresh the page. Providing my email for sending the token. Send token. Our OTT has sent successfully. Here is the success message. Let's check the console for the link. Here is the magic link. Let's click on this link. it opens the same login page. What is the issue? We have added OTT sent as whitelisted. Let's remove forward slash and try again. Restart the application, refresh the page, provide the username, send token, OTT is sent. Check the console. Here is the magic link. Same login page. What is happening here? Security configuration seems okay. Let's check the magic link generation success handler. Here we are building the URL. Let's check the Spring security documentation for one-time token authentication. Scrolling down, here is the code snippet. This is the handle method. This is our URL component builder. Form HTTP URL, replace path. Okay, maybe I have provided the wrong replace path. Let's check. Yes, here I have provided wrong replace path. We use replace path to reset the path of the URL of the application's base context. So we need to update the URL to request.getContextPath for getting the application's base context. With that fix, let's check the application again. Restart the server. Here our application started. Go to the application, updating the URL. Here, provide our username. Send token. We have this success message. Check the console. Here is the magic link. Click on the link. Here is the form to provide the token. The input field is populated with the token. Here is the magic link which contains the token and the form is auto-filled with the token from the URL. Sign in. Here we are successfully logged in. Great work. Now it's time to send the token using email. We are going to use the Java mail for sending email. For this, we need to configure our application for sending email. We can configure it in our application.properties file. Here, I want to rename this file. I like the syntax of YML file, so I am going to rename it to the application.yml. Here, I do not need this property. Let's remove it. Here, we need to provide necessary property for email configuration. Spring, mail, then host. Here, I am going to use my Gmail. So, the host for Gmail is smtp.gmail.com. Port is 587. Then username. Here, I need to provide my Gmail username. Then password. We need to get a application password for this. I will show you how can you do this shortly. But for now, just providing a placeholder. Then we need properties, mail, smtp, set the auth as true, start TLS, enable to true. Now let's get the application password for Gmail. Go to myaccount.google.com/app passwords. Here we need to log in using our Google account. Here we have this form. In this input field, provide a app name. Create. Our application is created. Here is the generated password. Copy this one. Back to the IDE. Paste it here. Removing the spaces. Now our application configuration is complete. Closing the application.yml file. Here is our magic link generation success handler. In the handle method, here we'll send the email to the user. Inside this class, adding a new private final field, sender. This is the sender of the email. Let's get the username of the sender from the properties. We can do this using the value annotation. Here, provide the name of the property, that is spring.mail.username. Let's check if it's correct. Opening the application.yml file. Here we have this username, spring mail username. Back to the class. Actually, this field does not need to be final. Then we need another field, private final Java mail sender. Name it mail sender. We need constructor for dependency injection. Generate constructor. Choose the mail sender. Click OK. Now scrolling down. Here we will send a mail. Let's add a try catch block. If there is any exception, print the stack trace. Let's add a comment. send magic link via email. Inside this try block, creating a new simple mail message instance named message. Then set from here, providing my name, then concatenate with the sender. Then we need email address of the recipient. We can get it using our one-time token dot. Here you can see available methods. We are going to use this get username. That is because we have chosen email address as username. Next, we'll define subject, one-time token. Then finally, provide the body of the message. Here, define the message body variable, string, message, body equals. Here, provide the message, hello from Spring Security OTT. Use the following link to sign in to the application. Here, provide %s, then format it. Provide the magic link as argument. And finally, send the email. With that, our success handler is complete. Let's try this out. Start the server, back to the browser, refresh. Here is the login form. Provide the email, send token. The token is sent. Let's check my email. Here is the email. And this is the magic link. Click here, our application token submission page, sign in, and yes, we have successfully logged in. And that wraps up our tutorial on implementing one-time token authentication in Spring Security 6.4.2. We covered everything from setting up authentication, generating one-time token, sending it via email, and allowing user to log in securely using the magic link. This method enhances security while making the login process seamless. But this is just one part of mastering Spring Boot and Spring Security. If you want to dive deeper, check out my other videos where I cover essential Spring Boot concepts, security best practices, and hands-on projects. You will find tutorials on setting up Spring Security from scratch, working with JWT authentication, and much more. So make sure to watch those videos. And if you found this one helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Spring Boot content. If you have any question, feel free to drop them in the comments. I would love to help. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.